Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm really excited. I gave a presentation very similar to this at an event a couple weeks ago, and people seemed to find it really helpful. So I wanted to do it again, give some more people an opportunity to learn this content and see if we can get some podcasts launched. It's such a fun way to spread your message and really engage with your audience. It's my favorite type of media. So if I can help anybody launch their show or just give you guys some information how you can do it yourself, that is what I'm here to do. So I do want to make sure that everybody can get these slides. I will send out the recording, but if you wanted to see the slides so that you have access to them later, you can scan this barcode. Yes, I sound old. I just said barcode instead of QR code. Or go to favoriteDaughterMedia.com/webinar. So I will leave this up for just a second while I introduce myself. So I am Sarah Losi. I founded Favorite Daughter Media back at the end of 2022. And I launched in basically to help business owners and entrepreneurs grow through thought leadership. Podcasting is my favorite media. It is an amazing way to engage with an audience, find an audience, and really have an impact. I'll talk a lot more about what that impact can be for your business, but this is what I do. This is how I spend every day, just launching podcasts and producing them and doing all the fun, creative stuff that I love to do so much. So, a little bit on just what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about thought leadership. We're going to talk about how podcasts can grow a business, the very specific ways that you can find new audiences, engage your audiences through a podcast. I do have a 7-step process for launching a podcast that you can do completely on your own. So I'll walk through all 7 steps. And as I walk through those, we're going to go through a case study of one of my favorite clients' podcasts so you can really see how it works in action. And I want this to be interactive. So if anyone unmutes themselves or and yells out an answer or answers a question or puts it in the chat, Larry Roberts, my co-host, is of my podcast, is on here. So if it's in the chat, he can read those out as well. So feel free to use the chat too. But I want to know who is familiar with the term thought leader. If you guys raise your hands, shout out yes, whatever it is. I see a bunch of hands up for the people that did turn their cameras on. Does someone want to unmute and kind of tell me like what a thought leader means, what that means to you? Someone's got to do it. Don't let me hanging.
Okay.
Jay didn't grab that mic, man.
Amanda beat me to it. I saw Amanda come in there
No, it's
first.
okay. You can do it if you want to. That's okay. Okay.
I'm just kidding.
A thought leader basically is someone who impacts and inspires others, and creates a conversation with their thoughts and opinions, so on and so forth.
Yep, that is great. They are people that drive conversations. Like you said, they shape opinions and spark discussions, usually within either an industry or a niche. And in order to be a thought leader, I usually think of these 3 traits that somebody should have if they're going to be a thought leader. And that's courage, because you really need to be able to speak up in a crowd. You can't be afraid to share your opinions, to speak up, to maybe give things that aren't the popular opinion and stand out. You need to have passion. You have to portray emotion when you're talking about your topic. Emotion in those connections are really what put you forward and get people to connect. And then you have to be authentic. You have to be leading with who you truly are, because you just really cannot fake all of this. So a little bit about just why podcasting is my favorite medium for marketing. I only have about an hour with you guys. I don't want to go over and take everyone's time, but so I'll just go through a few stats really quick. But 464.7 million people listen to podcasts. And that is a lot of people. That's a lot of potential reach. 1 in 3 Americans are regular podcast listeners. And podcasts, because of how they are rooted in stories and genuine connections, they have the ability to build trust. So 64 people trust podcast hosts more than other quote unquote influencers. 51% of marketers are already incorporating podcasts into their marketing plans. 69% of listeners have found new brands through podcasts, and 41% of listeners have a household income of $75,000 or more. So these are people who can be making purchase decisions. Now, does everyone on this call actually listen to podcasts? I'm seeing some nodding and some hands raised. Can someone unmute Jerry this time, maybe, because you Amanda beat you last time. Why is it that you listen to podcasts?
Oh man, a combination of things. I can listen to it while I'm doing my morning ruck, while I'm doing work on my computer, and I don't have to listen in slow motion. Like I can speed it up to 1.5 to 2 times speed and consume it faster and feel like the Matrix, except I'm not learning Kung Fu.
I would love to learn Kung Fu from a podcast.
Right?
That'd be so much fun.
That would be awesome.
Chelly, I probably, or Shell, I'm saying your name wrong, I'm sure. You had your hand raised. Why do you
Yeah,
listen to
it's-
podcasts?
I'm so sorry. It's Shell. And I apologize
Yeah.
for not being on camera. I look like a hot mess, y'all, because I just worked out. So my bad.
You're fine.
Yeah, y'all don't want to see all that. Anyways, yeah, I've been listening to podcasts for a long time, but I listen to true crime podcasts and serial killer podcasts.
Don't we all?
I'm a love for horror and Halloween, and so I listen to a lot of that. And then I also listen to things that are, I would guess I would say educational in the politics arena. Some things I have forgotten since my high school days, and I need to make sure that I understand what I'm listening to, and especially when I'm trying to make an impactful. I'm a true believer in voting, and so I want to make sure that I'm saying the right things and promoting the right things when it comes down to stuff like that. On my podcast, I've had some politicians on there, and I want to make sure that I am sending the right message. So I listen sometimes to podcasting for educational reasons.
That's awesome. I think I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I'm gonna put you back on mute. Perfect. So the 5 main reasons, and you said one yourself, that was education. The five biggest reasons that people listen to podcasts are community, connection, entertainment, education, and inspiration. So my goal here is to help us kind of reverse engineer that. How can we take a podcast and create this experience for our audience to get them to interact with us? So how can we use a podcast to build our own community, create those connections, entertain people, but also educate them and then inspire them to take action? And that is what our goal is going to be. So getting into how we use podcasts for business growth, there's 4 pieces that I'm going to talk about: niche targeting, personal branding, SEO, and lead generation. First, I personally hate this quote just because I say niche, so it doesn't actually rhyme in my head. So the riches are in the niches. And this is incredibly true for podcasting. Podcasts are incredibly niche. They reach very specific audiences, and there's such a diverse amount of topics out there that let you get really specific about the audience that you're going to be reaching out to. So for me, the first podcast that I ever listened to was called Potterless. And I think you could tell from the title that is a podcast about Harry Potter. And it's a very specific audience that's going to reach. The only people that are going to listen to that podcast are people interested in Harry Potter. So nerds like me. And the podcast that I host is called Branded. It's about personal branding. So our listeners are going to be people who are entrepreneurs and content creators and are trying to build a personal brand. So the way that we're able to format the quiches in the niche, thank you. The way that we're able to format our podcasts can make them get found by exactly who we are trying to reach. So we can find a very, very niche audience very easily. And like I said, I have a podcast about personal branding. So of course, I'm going to talk about personal branding. Podcasts are so valuable in building a personal brand because people don't want to interact with businesses. They want to interact with people. So when you're on a podcast and you're talking personally to your audience, you're giving them insights into who you are, you're telling your stories, you're able to show yourself as a person instead of showing just the company. People want to know who the person behind the logo is. And you become a thought leader in your space. We touched on what thought leadership is, and building that personal brand and having that podcast all goes into becoming that thought leader. You're able to share authentic stories to connect with others. Stories are so important when it comes to human connection. We all connect through shared experiences. And when we're telling stories and giving a little insight into our experiences and what we've been through, that's how we create those connections and really start to build trust with our audiences. And then they also help you build relationships. I am a big fan of the saying that what is even now? I don't remember what the saying is. um, marketing tells, but stories sell. That's it. So I work in marketing, and I know that having those personal relationships that come from telling stories and sharing who you are and sharing information and everything that you could do with the podcast, that's going to help you build those relationships so that you build up your customer base. So is everyone familiar with SEO? Touch on it a little bit. So SEO is search engine optimization. It's basically how we get search engines like Google to show our company and our content when someone searches for a relevant keyword. So podcasts are a really great opportunity to really add to that search engine optimization. So it's a lot of different, helps you really get Google to put your content first when someone is searching for something. The first of the four like really important aspects of SEO is the keywords. These are what people are searching. These are the search terms. If my company is Favorite Daughter Media, if someone searches Favorite Daughter Media, I'm going to show up. But I also want to show up if someone is searching for podcast production. So podcast production becomes a really important keyword for my business. So now with podcasts, there's so many opportunities for us to add those keywords. We could put them in the titles, the show notes, blog posts, transcripts, URLs, and even metadata, which is that page content that doesn't actually get seen by people, but it does get seen by the search engines. So when we add an episode of a podcast onto our website, all of these keywords show up and strengthen our website for Google. And now to really look at how this works, this is an episode of our podcast Branded that we put out on the topic of monetization. So the title of the podcast was Monetizing Your Podcast, a look at the most common misconceptions. If we want someone to find this episode, they're going to be trying to learn more about podcasts, monetizations, and branding. So those are the three main keywords. I searched this page and podcast showed up 63 times. Monetization showed up 43 times and brand showed up 30. And that's because if you scroll down on this landing page, you have not only the title and the video and the player that you see, but you also have the show notes. You also have an entire transcript with every word that we said in this episode. And then you have the bios of myself and my co-host that talk about why we're experts in these topics. So this is so much content and SEO rich content that's going to help you get found when someone is looking for something about podcast monetization. But then I took it a step further. So I took that episode and that transcript and I wrote it into a blog. One of the things I say most often is that people are very specific about how they take in content. So not everybody is going to be a podcast listener, and that's okay. You're not going to launch a podcast and suddenly inspire the world to listen to podcasts if they don't already do it. But you can use your podcast to create more content for different people. So having this one big piece of content, I then took a part of the transcript and turned it into a blog post. That blog post lives on my website. The blog post is just explaining the differences between indirect and direct podcast monetization. By doing this, I added 17 more mentions of podcast and 12 more mentions of monetization. So all of this comes together to make my website really strong for these keywords. And Rich, yes, the podcast website is created on Podpage. So the next is diversity of content. Google gets bored easily. It doesn't want all of the same type of content. So if all your website has is a lot of text and a couple of images, it's not going to be very strong. So you want to have all these different types of content for your website. So from one podcast episode, you're able to add an embedded audio player, an embedded video player, the text from your show notes, and the images. So this is all different types of content that's going to make Google more likely to show your website. And then the final one is engagement. The average person spends less than 1 minute on a website, and Google gets far more happy if your website is one that people spend more time on. So the more you can have people engaging on your website, the better you're going to rank in the search engines. So with a podcast, you're adding interactive content. So someone can go onto your website and click play on your podcast player, and they don't necessarily have to sit there and stare at the screen. It might be in another tab, but they're still on your website. They're still engaging. So that's going to be very helpful in getting Google to help you show up. I lied, there's one more. Link building. So link building is also really important for SEO. Google is kind of like the popular kid in high school that doesn't want to be friends with you unless you're also the popular kid in high school. So you want to prove that your website has authority by linking to and from other websites that also have authority. So if you're able to add a podcast to your website, you're then adding all of those backlinks. So you're linking to audio players, you're linking to YouTube. If you have guests on your show, you're linking to their websites. You have links to social media. If you're mentioning different resources or different websites in the episode, you're including those in your show notes and linking to them. So you have more and more of these links that are just proving that your website has credibility because it's associated with other websites. So moving on from SEO, we're going to talk about lead generation. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I could spend 4 days talking about it, but lead generation is really just the process of getting a prospect into your sales funnel. And podcasts are really great for that because you're able to use things like lead magnets to turn listeners into subscribers. And from that, you're able to engage them from your email list. Now, instead of going really deep into this, I do have an ebook if you guys want to really dig into how to do this. This is my 50 Ways to Generate Leads ebook. It literally has 50 different ideas for lead magnets. So if you want to download that, you can scan the code or go to favoriteleadmagnets.com. And that'll talk far more in depth about how you can use this. But really the key is when someone is just listening to you on a podcast, they don't necessarily have access to everything that you do. So all of your services. But if you create a lead magnet, it's going to be a really valuable piece of content, something like an ebook or a PDF, maybe a webinar that's already been pre-recorded, things like this that someone, if they want to access it, they need to give you your email address. So that's going to put them on your subscriber list. And if you make it something that's really high value, that really relates to the content that you're talking about on that podcast, it should basically be a next step. So if I was doing a whole webinar on lead magnets and how they work, a next step would be how do you make them? What are examples? So this lead magnet itself would be a great example. So I could send them here to learn that next step, which is how to create them. So it's just a way to put together some really great content, entice them into wanting to get on your email list, and then you use your email list to market to them. So you send out your sales emails, you send out more content, you engage with them by email and turn those leads into clients and customers. So now we're going to jump into actually creating a podcast. We talked about why it's valuable and why you should do it. So now we're going to talk about how to do it. So first, there's two different avenues if you are interested in podcasting. Maybe you want to actually launch a podcast, or maybe you just want to be a guest. And that's another really great option. So I'm just going to go over some quick pros and cons of both of them. So for launching a podcast, all of the content is going to be tailored to your interests and your messaging. So you're going to have full control over what your show is about. You'll also have more time to cultivate relationships with your audience because you have episodes and seasons at all of this different time spent with your listeners. They're able to help you build thought leadership. You can build a community specifically around your own brand, and you get all of that SEO for your website and all the social content that comes with the podcast episodes. But of course, they are a time commitment. They are a financial investment. You need to really build up your audience if you don't have one already. And it is a long game. Podcasts are not an overnight success story. All of the really famous podcasts that you listen to started off with 3 listeners, and they were probably related to them, with the exception of the like Joe Rogan shows, who are their celebrities. They kind of have a leg up. But then there's the option to just be a guest. And I actually launched my company originally just focusing on podcast guesting because it's so easy and it's so much fun and it's so effective. So if you want to be a guest, it's less time and work up front. You don't have to put the time into actually creating a show. It's less costly because it can be expensive to create your own show if you don't know how to do it yourself. And you are already reaching pre-established audiences. So you're reaching the audience that host already put the time into curating. You're still able to build thought leadership. It can serve as practice if you want to launch a show later, but you've never done a podcast episode. Maybe instead of launching one right away, you start with guesting. You get that practice in, you learn from the hosts that are interviewing you, kind of the best practices for being a good host yourself. So you put in the time now and really get to know the medium, and then you launch a show later. And then again, all of these episodes that you guest on can go on your website. You get that SEO power and you get social media content to help share it and grow your brand. But you have less time to build connections with listeners. You only have that one episode versus all of the episodes and seasons you'd have for your own show. And the messaging and the quality is in the host's control. There's podcasts that you'll go on that you're like, wow, this is an amazing experience, amazing podcast. I'm so proud to share this. Or you might go on shows that are not the best, that you don't necessarily want to share as much. They might not interview you well enough to pull out the right content. They might not focus on the topics you really want to talk about. So all of that is going to be in the show, the host's control. So you'll want to do a lot of research ahead of time to make sure you're picking the right shows. And just like launching a show, this is also a long game. It's not going to happen overnight. You'll slowly get some traction. You'll slowly become a more sought after guest, but it is not something that happens super fast. So to start a podcast, we need capital. So everyone pull out your credit cards. I'm going to pull out my Venmo. That is not the capital that I mean, I promise. Capital stands for concept, audience. I'm glad you guys are muted, but I can still see at least one person laughed at my bad joke. Thank you. Concept, audience, proposition, identity, tech, action, and launch. So we're going to go through all of these steps, and we're going to go through them with a case study. So I'm going to walk through exactly how I went through all of these steps with one of my current clients. So we're starting with the concept. The concept is the basics of your show. So what do you want to talk about? What's the structure? Do you want to have guests? Do you want to do a solo show? Do you want a combination? All different ideas. Oh my God, Jerry said it almost got up to get my wallet. I won't say no. All of the different ideas that go into creating that show is going to be your content. This is when you come up with your name. This is when you come up with the description, when you start writing out a trailer episode. What are you trying to say in all of these episodes that you're going to be bringing out? So Leah and Joanna, they're two clients of mine. They came to me because they wanted to launch a podcast and they wanted to focus on empowering women in financial services. So they already had a general idea of their concept. They wanted to talk about marketing best practices for financial services and the stories and experiences of women in the industry. So when you're coming up with your content, your concept, that's really the first step. It's what do you want to talk about? What is it that you have to say? What's the topic? What are you really interested in? What do you have to teach? When you think of like being a thought leader, what are the types of thoughts that you're leading on? I have a bit of a mantra that is use your outside voice. And when I say that, I'm always referring to this idea of when we were younger and we we're always being told to use our inside voices. And if you were like me, half the time when you're being told that, you're not even inside. You're just really loud and your mom wants you to be quiet. Thank you, at least one person. So when you start talking about that one topic that makes you really excited, that you just can't use that inside voice. You just have to speak loudly. You're so excited that you feel like if you don't just start yelling about this, you're going to bubble over. It's those topics that if you're sitting around a table and someone brings it up, your partner sitting next to you rolls their eyes and says, please don't get them started. That is your concept, because that is the thing that you will be able to record multiple episodes on, because it's going to be hard for you to even stop recording that one episode because you're just on your own rant. Everything like this is what you want to talk about. So it makes it really easy. So then you have to figure out your audience. So who are you talking to? What are they interested in? Who is your avatar? So now when I say your avatar, you want to know exactly who you're talking to the point that they have a name. So be as specific as you can. Like, are you talking to men versus women or a combination? What's their age? Where are they living? What do they do for a living? How long is their commute? Like, how specific are you able to get about your person? So this is the avatar for Leah and Joanna's podcast. Her name is Megan. She's a 41-year-old financial advisor. She lives in Austin, Texas. She sets high goals for herself and wants to be seen as a mentor to the associates in her firm. She's social. She values lifelong learning and has learned resiliency through her career. If anyone is a woman that's worked in finance, you know that resiliency is a very important trait to have when you work in finance. But how specific can we get? How much can we really feel like we know this person so that when we're speaking into a microphone, we're actually speaking to them? We're actually giving them the content that they came here to hear. We're telling them what they want to know. We're telling them what they're interested in. And that's how you're going to get someone to become a listener and really stick with your show and become part of that community. Proposition. So what is your unique listening proposition? If anyone has worked in sales, you've probably heard the term USP, unique selling proposition. This is very similar, but it's why is someone going to be listening to your podcast? What is unique about it? What are people going to gain if they listen to your show? And why would they choose your show over others? People have a limited amount of time. They're not listening to every single podcast out there. That would never work. They're going to be choosing very carefully which ones they want to dedicate their time to. So you want to make sure that you have a very strong, unique listening proposition. So for Leah and Joanna's show, we wanted to outline the propositions as it is a podcast specifically about marketing for financial services. And this was specific because we were looking through the different podcasts that were out there. There were a ton of finance shows. There were a ton of marketing shows, but there were not that many shows about marketing for finance. That is something that made them very unique. And then it's hosted by women for women. So it does have a little bit of that femininity to it, which is not that common in finance. Finance is a very male-dominated industry. So having a show about finance hosted by women with their main audience being women makes that something that's unique about their show. But they also are very careful to make sure that it is an inclusive show. It's not a man-hating show. It's not male-bashing show. It's just focused on women, and men are more than welcome to listen as well. And then another unique thing about the show is that it brings on female industry leaders to share their own stories and advice. So it's not just the advice of the host, it's not just their stories, but it's also female leaders within finance. So these are people that don't have as much of a platform, and they're not as well known. They're not as seen because, again, it's a very male-heavy industry. So this is a show that focuses on those contributions from women that might be less common or less commonly talked about. And then the identity. So we've started building out our concept. We have an idea of what we're trying to say and who we're trying to say it to, but what does the show look and feel like? So what is your title and subtitle? What's your description? What's your cover art? And please buy a URL. Every page on my website, for the most part, has a unique URL so that I can send someone directly to where I want them to go. So if you have a podcast, even if it does live on your website, just buy a URL that redirects to the podcast landing page. This is going to make it so much easier to be found. So someone asked earlier, how do you choose the name of your show? So the best podcast name is the one that doesn't have to be explained. And I'm going to give an example. One of my former clients came to me to help them launch their podcast. They already had a name, and it was The Physician's Perspective. If one person, please, can unmute and tell me what that show is about with the title, The Physician's Perspective. Jerry looks like he's getting ready.
I'd say physician's perspective, but I don't know about what.
Wrong. It's about real estate.
What? No.
Yes. Needless to say, that show did not launch, and they're no longer my client.
I'm shocked.
Thank you. They were talking to doctors about real estate, but still, it made no sense. I changed it to Real Estate Prescribed, but it still never launched. So, like I said, you want a title that does not have to be explained, because you don't have the opportunity to explain the concept to people when they're just scrolling through Apple Podcasts or they're just scrolling through Spotify. All they have is the name of your show and your cover art. So between the two of these items, it has to be enough to get them to at least then take the next step and read your description or listen to your trailer. So you want them to be very obvious. I am the queen of the puns and the cutesy everything. This is the one place that I avoid them unless they do still make sense, because you don't want to have to just to explain it. If you do have a cutesy title that you're really dead set on and you really want it, that's when a subtitle comes in. So you can have your cutesy title, but then make sure the subtitle is very, very obvious. So when I got into the podcasting field, and the first show I ever produced was called Don't Retire, Graduate. And I know exactly what that's about because it's ingrained in my brain. And it was also the title of a book. The book did not sell well, and that was because no one knew for sure just from the title what it was about. But if I talked to someone in person and I had the time to explain it, every single person bought a copy. Everyone wanted to listen to the show. So making sure that you have the title that's very obvious, because you're not always going to be there to give them that explanation, is going to be vital for actually getting listened to. Jerry knows a guy's show is Beyond the Rut. What is he thinking? Oh, it's a horrible name. I'm just kidding. You have a great show. It's not as bad as Readily Random. Sorry, Larry.
I didn't realize we were going to be personally attacked on this show. I didn't.
You're one of the few people I know, so you're the only target I've got. So when we got to the point with Leah and Joanna to really start creating their show, this is what we came up with. The name was Women Share. They loved the name. They came up with it, and it's a little bit cutesy. It does still say what the show is about a little bit. It's women and they're sharing, but if we wanted to go with this name, we needed to make sure that the subtitle was incredibly clear. So the subtitle is A Marketing Guide for Women in Financial Services. Nothing cutesy in there, very straightforward. You can read that and know exactly what the show is about. So now, Jerry, you didn't get the other one right. Can you tell me what this show is about?
I'd say it's a marketing guide for women in financial services.
Wrong, real estate.
No.
No, you're correct on this one.
Okay.
You're correct. This one is marketing for women in finances. And when you write out your description, you have 4,000 characters to use. So you really want to build it out, but also remember that nobody's reading past the first maybe 2 paragraphs. So the beginning, you want to write it very well. You want it to sound great, sound professional, give them a little bit of your personality. After that, keyword load it. As many keywords as you can fit. Larry and I have different views on this. This is my opinion. You don't have to take it as fact, but as many keywords as you can get towards the end, because at that point, you're not writing for people, you're writing for robots, you're writing for SEO. So the beginning of their description, a podcast where successful women in financial services share their stories and best practices with the mission to help other women grow their businesses and careers. So it's very obvious here what that show is about. And then we need to come up with a cover. So I always like to give 3 or more options for cover art. And when you're creating that cover art, spend some time thinking about what you like, what your personality is. You want the cover to feel like you. So we also went through some of the current podcasts out there that are popular and within their category, saw what other people were doing, how are they standing out, which covers of existing shows are resonating, which ones do we want to be similar to. So these were the 3 concepts that I presented to them that really played with those ideas and what was resonating with them. They wanted to show that it's okay to work in finance and still show up messy and show up as yourself. So I went with a messy bun with some finance doodles behind it. They wanted it to be very authentic, so we went with some handwriting instead of really formal fonts. And we put all of these together, came up with the one that they liked the best, and then turned that into their podcast branding. This is a fantastic show. If anyone is interested in plug for these awesome clients, you can find it at womensharepodcast.com. This is the part that scares people. This is the part that gets everybody nervous because technology is hard. It is, but it doesn't have to be. If anyone else has ever decided they're going to start a hobby and bought everything possible for that hobby, or maybe you have a kid who decided they're going to play a certain sport that needs a lot of equipment and then they gave up after 1 season. Sorry, mom and dad. Yes, I've done that 3 times. I have everything you could possibly need for hand embroidery. I've never hand embroidered anything. I have everything you could possibly need to make clay jewelry. I don't have any clay jewelry. Don't do that here. If you're just starting out, you're just figuring out how this works and how podcasting works and whether or not this is even something you're interested in, you don't have to go out and buy the $1,000 microphone. You don't have to go out and get build a recording studio in your office. It's okay. Go and buy a simple microphone on Amazon, get some headphones, maybe a ring light if your lighting isn't great. Find a quiet place that you can record. That's all you have to do. It can be very simple. If you go on my website, there is a page of resources. I think it's a drop down under free stuff. And that's just some recommended products, microphones in different budgets, different things that you can buy that are very easy to use, and start there. You can start budget friendly because you might hate this. You might realize this isn't for you. You can, as you grow and as you improve, you can invest more money into it, but you don't have to start with the most expensive stuff. You're going to need a few different softwares, whether you're doing it editing by yourself or not. Maybe someone else is going to do it for you. You won't have to worry as much about software. And then you'll want a website. Your podcast can live on your website. That's totally fine. That's actually preferred. But if it doesn't actually connect to your business and it's something not related, or maybe it's like mine where it's hosted by two people with their own brands, so we don't want it living on one single site, then you can create a website for it. And there are builders like the one that we use, which is called Podpage. There's a link to that as well on that resources page. And that is something that you put in the link to your podcast and it builds a website for you. So a very easy tool for people who are not website developers. So then after we figure out the technology, then we need to take action. So what is the call to action? This is what you're trying to get people to do when they listen to your show. So this is where the business comes in, because this is basically your sales pitch, but you want it to be very strategic. Nobody is really going to make a hard sale from a podcast because you want to be focusing on relationships. So instead, make it something like go download the lead magnet that you created so that you can sell to them by email instead, or subscribe to the podcast so they can continue listening, continue getting to know you, building that trust until they get to the point that they do want to work with you. Or book a call. Maybe it's just you want to learn more, you have questions. Book a call with you so that you can answer those questions. Whatever it is that you want listeners to do, whatever that basically first step in your funnel is, you give that at the end of every episode. This is also if you want to guest on a podcast, this is still something you want to put thought into. When you're a guest on a podcast, what's your call to action? What do you want someone to do after they listen to that episode? And then you launch. So you choose the date you want to launch your show and you have a podcast. Figure out how you want to incorporate that podcast into your marketing plan and launch it. Tell everybody about it, post about it on social media, send it out to your email list, tell your friends, tell your mom, have her share it on her Facebook, because for some reason more people like it when she says it than when I say it. Whatever it takes to get people to really hear you and know that this show exists is what you have to do. And make sure you are using the content. The biggest thing that I hear from people who tried podcast guesting and did not see a return or see anything come out of it, I always ask them, well, what did you do with the episode? And they say, well, I guested on it. And it ended there. That's not enough. Every podcast episode gives you the ability to have a million different pieces of content. You can fill an entire month's content calendar with one episode of your podcast, or even one episode of a podcast you guest on, if you cut it up enough. So from one episode, you can get quote cards. Find something, a really good nugget that you said that can stand alone and either give a piece of education, something that's inspirational. Put that on a graphic, post it to Facebook. It's easy as that. Create a reel or a short. You don't have to be a video editor to do this. There are apps that will help you. The latest one that I've been using is called CapCut. It has a free version. It's really great. Write a blog. We talked about this before. Take the transcript of your episode and write a blog about it. If you're a guest on an episode, write a blog either about what you talked about or even about the experience. If maybe it's your first time going on a podcast, write a blog about what to expect the first time you go on a podcast. Anything that takes that big piece of content and makes it smaller and makes it just more opportunities to get eyes on it is a great thing to do. Audiograms are those little videos that have a still image with the sound waves over it and you can hear a little clip. Those are fun. Those are good if you don't have a video aspect of your show. If you do have a video show, it's better to actually use the video. But if you're going audio only, an audiogram is a great way to do that. LinkedIn articles. Instead of publishing the blog on your website, publish it to LinkedIn and get another way of reaching a new audience. Make graphics, blast it to your email list, tell them you're on the show, tell them you're launching a show, tell them every time a new episode comes out, remind them to listen, remind them to subscribe. Your email list is your own. You can use it however you want. So make sure you're taking advantage of it. And that's it. That is how you create a podcast. That's how you use it to grow your business. If you did not get the slides at the beginning and you want to make sure you get them now, you can. I think this is the right one. I may not have swapped it out, honestly. So we're going to go back to the beginning. So you can make sure you get the right slides, because I have ADHD and forget to do things sometimes. But that is all of my content. I would love to, we have 10 minutes. I would love to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions that I can answer, feel free to either drop it in the chat or take yourself off mute. Don't make me just sit here and stare at you guys, please.
I have a question.
Okay.
We're talking about podcast names. How would you go about changing a name of something you've been doing? I've got 170 something episodes in already.
So that's going to depend on a few different things. Is the show going to be the same concept?
Yeah, I just think the name could be better.
What's the show?
It's called Big Promo Cast, but we talk about
Okay.
branded merch, and so I think Merch Cast would be better. And I actually own that domain, so I just never used it.
So I'm going to tag in Larry Roberts to answer this question because I already know he's going to have a better answer than I do.
Well, I see Larry every other month, so I don't want to hear from him.
Yeah, Larry. no
Man,
one
Rich,
can-
I thought we were friends.
I would say if you're going to change your name, if you already have an audience, just make sure that you are communicating it to them. Don't change it right away. Start rolling it out slowly. So announce that you're going to have that change, give it a while, make a few different announcements so that when it does officially change, people see it coming. You don't want it to suddenly disappear from their feeds
Right.
because they're looking for a show that no longer exists. So just
And would you do it? Would you do a drastic change to the cover art? Like right now, it shows my co-host's face on it. She's not really part of it anymore, so I would just do my face. But do you even care about people on cover art?
My personal opinion is to not put yourself on your cover art just because you have such little amount of space to
Mhm.
convey a lot of information. Going back to that idea of the concept, those unique listening propositions, you
Right.
want to make sure that between your title and your cover art, it's really obvious what the show is about.
Okay.
And unless your face is part of that, it's only taking away from room that you have to convey that message. So if you're a celebrity and someone would listen to your show just because you are that person, then your face is your unique listener proposition. But other
Okay.
than that, there's very rarely a reason that your picture will make it better. If you're going to change your cover art, I don't think that's a problem as long as it stays within the same branding.
Mhm.
So don't go completely different. Removing your co-host, totally fine. Try to keep like the same fonts, the same colors, have it still be cohesive to your brand.
Okay, cool. Larry, what do you think? Seriously.
No, seriously, Sarah nailed it. I would definitely stick with the same RSS feed that you have. Just let the audience know and communicate that you're going to be rebranding, and just do it just like you would rebrand anything else. I mean, you're a merch expert, so I know you work with businesses on a regular basis that go through this exact same exercise. And we would take a very similar approach. Just announce the fact
Okay.
that you're going to rebrand, but I would not switch to a different RSS feed just because you're changing the name of the show.
Okay. And so previous episodes, just let them go. That's just the way it is. They're named that way, and just don't
Mhm.
change it. There's nothing. to change.
There's no need to go back and change them, but if
Yeah.
if you're like me, I personally would go back and change them just because I'm so I don't want to use the word anal, but that's all that's coming to mind right now. I have to have everything look the exact same. So
Mhm.
I would, but there's absolutely, I don't believe there's any real value to
Yeah.
do that other than just from an organizational perspective.
Yeah. And you can also include in the description or on your website somewhere, like formerly the blank, like whatever it is,
Okay.
so that people still see like, okay, that's where that show went. It doesn't just disappear completely.
Cool.
Shell, you have your hand raised.
I want to say thanks for doing this. Gosh, I've been doing podcasting for a minute, so it's good to have this refresher and
Aw.
to meet all you guys. And I would love to follow all you guys if you would throw your handle down there in the chat so I can do that right now before we run out of time. Thanks.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. I hope it was valuable for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Any other questions? We got 5 more minutes.
Hi, I have a question. Actually, I have a few, but I was wondering if you could share the pros and cons or the success of going audio versus video or having both available.
Larry just got really excited about this question. Um, so right now, just in the state of podcasting in general, video is king. Video is going to be the way that you're going to get found the most. Shell, stop sticking your tongue out at me. um, Video is going to help you get found. Being on YouTube, right now, YouTube is actually the #1 podcast platform. It beat out Spotify, it beat out Apple Podcasts, and it's actually the #2 search engine in the world, owned by the #1 search engine in the world. I'm literally quoting things that Larry tells me every day. But it really is the best platform to be on for discoverability. If you don't do video, you can still be on YouTube and have either a still image with the audio overlaying, or you can do like captions so people can have something to look at. But if you're able to do video, we definitely recommend it for that discoverability reason, but also because it helps you create that repurposable content. So right now, between TikTok, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts, YouTube Clips, all of these different pieces of content that are going viral, that are getting the most attention, they are all video based. And those are the ones that are the most shareable because they're engaging. So having that video, even if it is just so you can use it for repurposing, is going to be really important. You said one versus the other. I say do it together. Got a ditch. Oh, you're all. Thank you for coming. Do them together. The way that we do ours is the video goes up on YouTube and the audio goes up on the podcast players. The podcast players are starting to roll out having video. So depending on the hosting system that you use, you may be able to put your video on your main RSS feed. But definitely you'd be missing an opportunity if you don't do video, in my opinion.
Thank you. And my only other question is, what is a reasonable frequency for creating and posting new episodes?
That is a great question. My rule of thumb is usually once a week, if you can, every other week if you can't. But at the same time, the biggest thing is going to be consistency. So if you can only commit to doing 1 episode a month, do 1 episode a month, but make sure you do it. Make sure it's on the same day every month so that people can expect it. It's just like with your favorite TV show. When we used to actually watch television, you knew it was going to come on at 7 p.m. on Friday. So you were on your couch in front of your TV, 7 p.m. on Friday. Podcasting is the same. They expect that your show will be out on Thursday, and that's what they listen to on their commute every Thursday. If it's not there that Thursday, they're going to find a different show to listen to. So you don't want to be inconsistent because you'll start to lose your space in people's plans. So do as often as you're able to commit to so that you can do it consistently. And don't worry too much about whether it's every week or every other week. If every week is too many times and that you just know that you'll be able to do it for a month and then you're going to stop because it's just too much work, go every other week. It's okay. Just choose one and stick with it.
Thank you.
Somebody asked in the chat, what do you use to record? Not Zoom, preferably. There are online platforms specifically for recording virtual podcasts. We use StreamYard, there's Riverside, there's a few different options. They're going to give you better quality. And it is 11:59. Yeah, Zoom will work, but it's not designed for it, so it won't be as high quality, correct? It is 11:59, so I will let everyone go. If you have other questions that I didn't get to answer, feel free to send me an email or book some time with me to chat. I would love to hear about the podcast that you guys are about to launch. So thank you all so much for joining me today.